So, Yart, how are your classes going at the moment?
They're going well, I think. We're like halfway through the block. I'm really enjoying them so far. How about
Nice.
you?
Yeah, they're going well for me too. What are you taking?
I'm taking spectral theory and integral systems.
That sounds really cool, but also kind of difficult.
I don't know, I like it. I think easy courses, they can be fun, but I think when there's challenge, then life becomes very fun as well.
That's very true. It's really rewarding when you do hard math and then finally figure out how things actually work.
Yeah, and just learning more. I really like learning.
Sorry, what's going on here? We have the room booked for It's Not Just Numbers. What's this? Who are you?
I'm Jamara.
I'm Yart.
And actually, they are our new guests for the podcast. Thank you very much for accepting for being here in this first episode of the third season that is arriving quite late, but is arriving. We have a chance to get to know our new two co-hosts. So possibly very soon you will hear an episode where I'm not present at all. You're listening to the Not Just Numbers podcast, a conversation with mathematicians on their work and their lives to get to know them and discuss common biases and misconceptions. I'm very, very happy that you accepted to join. And it would be nice for all our listeners to know who are the voices that they're hearing today. So can you tell us something more about you? So now we know that you are master students, because you have heard that you both take integrable systems and spectral theory. Can you tell us a bit more about the type of mathematics you like and how you arrived in Groningen?
So I do mathematical physics mostly. So actually looking at actual physical systems and then making them rigorous and looking at them in a mathematical way. In my thesis, I was also introduced to formal mathematics. So really working from the axioms of mathematics and having a computer verify your proofs, and then applying this to mathematical physics, which has also been really fun.
For me, I just started my master's this block, so spectral theory and integral systems are my first master's courses. The last block I wrote my thesis about higher dimensional knot theory, and I'm mostly interested in algebraic topology, but I also love to take little bits and pieces from all kinds of math and really see the bigger picture of things.
And what did you like about Groningen that made you stay with the master?
Mostly just the vibe and the atmosphere here. I think that was also for my bachelor's a huge factor when deciding to come here. I went to some different universities because I was 100% sure I wanted to do math, but I wasn't sure where. And of course, it's important that the university is good and that they have nice teachers and all the practical things, whatever. But I thought, yeah, I have to walk around here for at least 3 years, possibly 5 or even more. So I just need to be somewhere and feel at home. And Groningen really had that for me. So that was the main reason I decided to stay here.
I agree. I think especially the atmosphere, everyone is just super supportive. And at other universities I visited, there was sometimes a bit of competition. Who can be the best student, who can get the best grades. And that's just not at all something here. Everyone just hypes each other up and everyone wants the best for each other and there's no competition. And I really like that.
Well, very interesting to hear. From my side, I hardly know what it's like for the students. So I can only see what happens in class or during projects. So it's actually surprising and happily surprising to hear that this is the atmosphere that we have created here.
I think a big part of it is also the dynamic between students and professors. It's, I don't want to say informal, but there's no strong hierarchy here that, oh, your professor is the end-all be-all, you can't talk to them or whatever. They're always super happy to talk about their courses or their research. You can just go into their office and have a chat. And I think that's super nice. And it also makes it much more accessible to learn about new kinds of math that are maybe not covered in courses.
I also think one of the things I noticed is that a lot of professors here are preferred to be called by the first name, which really surprised me at first because I really expected that hierarchy, but it's really not, I mean, it's there, but not very visible.
Is it different at high school? Do you have a different relation with the professors, teachers there?
Yes, I would say so. You're not really allowed to call them by their first name. It's always like Miss or Mr. and then their last name. And then they really make it clear that they're above everyone else and you're supposed to just listen to them.
Yeah, this is also my experience. I had some teachers in high school who were typically a bit younger and they were like, yeah, I don't care. I'm just a person too. Call me by my first name. But most of them, they really wanted to be called Mr. or Mrs., whatever their last name was. I even had one teacher, people were saying her first name, not even to her, just in conversation. And she said, yeah, if I ever hear this again, I'll try to get you expelled. That's how important it was to her. And I get that for them, it's a feeling of not being respected, but also, does it need to be such a big deal?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have a strong opinion about this. I tend to ask students to just call me by first name because I think it's easier and makes it easier, the conversation, just knowing that we are on the same level, just a different level of expertise. But I also wonder if it's a two-way or if it's one way. Like I had professors both at school and the university that would want to be called by their surname, but they would also do the same with us. So I was Mr. Seri, I was not Marcello. So somehow it was a mutual type of respect. And this was also, in fact, at high school. We had a professor that was actually treating us in that way.
Yeah, well, I've never been called by my last name in high school.
Not in high school, but I've seen it happen at university. And I think, as you mentioned, then it's a much more equal dynamic, because that's just how you address each other in that context. But if you really feel that difference, then it's sometimes uncomfortable. And something I think is also hard at university specifically is everyone has different titles. Now, if you address them by their last name, you also need to memorize everyone's titles, which is, of course, important, but really hard to do in casual conversation, I think.
Yeah, we could argue about the importance of that, but I think also views will be different on this. There is something that you mentioned before we started recording. You were saying that you found your TA is so scary. So when you started in your first year, so somehow it fits in this relationship of more experience, more powerful and less. I'm curious also about that and what made that change.
I think for me, I'm fairly active within the study association here, the FMF. And that kind of gets you to informally hang out with people from higher years. And then you realize like, oh, they're just humans as well. And then again, your professors, they ask to be called by the first name. TAs ask to be called by the first name. And then over time, you finally realize like, oh, it's fine.
Yeah, I think also just when you get a bit further in your studies yourself, in your second or maybe your third year, you realize, yeah, I can become a TA for this course because I know enough. But that doesn't mean I'm God and I know everything. But I think when you're just starting in your first year, your TA is like the person who knows everything about this course, so they must be right always. And obviously that's just not true. But I think also just when you start out, everything is so new. It's not just the type of courses, but also how university functions, probably living on your own. All these things are new, and novelty is just inherently scary.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
I'll get back to this point later because I think it's worth having a look back at your experiences, which are quite fresh, and see what you can recommend to other listeners who are students. But before we get there, I'm curious to know why you're doing mathematics. So what brought you to the topic itself? Yeah.
So for me, it's a really bad reason, but I was good at math in high school. So I was like, okay, let's do it at the university. And the university math was completely different than my high school math, which surprised me quite a bit. But then I really liked it, so I kept going with it. It is a bad reason to go study math at university.
Why do you think it's a bad reason?
It's so different. I had never written a proof before. I just done integrals. Like, I literally thought going to university, I was just going to be solving more difficult integrals. And that was going to be my entire degree. And it isn't. There's so much more to math than what you're shown in high school.
At which moment it surprised you? So when did you realize this was actually very different from what you expected?
The first day.
Really, the first
yes.
day?
The first day we had a lecture. At that time it was called Kaleidoscope Mathematics, which was number theory with Professor Jaap Top. And you were writing proofs about divisibility and things like that. And I was like, wow, this is math? And then it scared me a little bit, but then I started to really enjoy it.
What helped you go over that scary moment? Like, what made you saying, the way I'm hearing this is that you went to that lecture, you were basically overwhelmed by this, and then you said, what am I doing? But then instead you said, you pushed through and you found that it was fun. So what made you push through? What did you...
Honestly, my classmates, especially after like the first exam, everyone was like, oh my, what was that? What are we doing? But because everyone felt that way, it didn't feel like an abnormal thing or something to struggle with it. It just felt like, oh, everyone does, so it's okay to push through because I'm not alone in this.
And for you, Jamara, was similar?
I think my experience was quite a bit different. I was also really good at math in high school, but that was not why I cared about math. I had some personal struggles throughout high school, and that manifested in not really showing up to my classes, especially mathematics, because I felt like, yeah, I can do this anyway. Let me take this as a mental health break. But I really loved, mostly throughout like YouTube and other types of social media, just seeing cool mathematics, very visual things, 3 blue, 1 brown videos, that kind of stuff. I saw this great series about imaginary numbers, and of course the computing with them bit is interesting, but that felt more like high school mathematics. I was really interested in the motivation behind those things and why we try to create new mathematics like that in the first place. And then going to open days and hearing that, yeah, it's more about the argumentation and the whys and the hows rather than the how to actually compute. I was like, this is perfect, because this is exactly what I like about mathematics. So I already knew I wanted to do mathematics when I was like 13 or 14. I looked at a bunch of different studies because I was also really interested in, say, biology and things like that. But math was just always on top for me.
And has your taste for mathematics changed throughout the years? So was there something that you liked and remain your end goal, ideal, something that's the thing that you always wanted to do and study, or throughout the studies you found out that there is a lot more that you liked, or that you just simply changed opinion on what you were studying and your interests have changed?
So for the first at least 2 years of doing mathematics here, I really enjoyed all the little bits and pieces of it. But I really had this feeling of like, I see people finding their kind of mathematics and I have not found my kind of mathematics yet. And especially throughout my starting my third year, I was kind of feeling a little bit lost because everyone seemed to have this epiphany of what kind of math they like. But I was also okay with that because, as I mentioned before, I really like the bigger picture of things and the connections between different kinds of math. So I tried to focus on that. And then in my 4th year, I took a course for my minor, algebraic topology. And that was just an eye-opener for me. I was like, yeah, this is where all the things come together and just make sense in my mind. It's very visual. I love visual kinds of math. So it's not that it really changed per se. It just took a while to appear in the first place.
And Jart?
I really thought in my first year that I was going to really like probability theory. And then I completely didn't. And I went way more into more physical things. At first, I was also very much into like rigor, very abstract math. And then as I took more courses, I was like, okay, it's fun. I still like a lot of math. I also do quite a bit of applied math still. But then I was like, abstraction is not everything. It's kind of fun to also look at things that you can actually do something with right now in the real world.
So that's what sparks your interest in mathematics, seeing both the theory and where it can make a difference, or
yes.
Where it can...
Yes, just how you can get the real world, which seems very chaotic and complicated, and then you can make it rigorous and you can make a model. The overview is way more there. And then it's like, but this is actually just the same thing as this other thing. And then everything makes sense. And
when did you get this realization that this is this was the part that attracted you the most in mathematics?
Like right before my thesis. So towards the end of my bachelor's. It also took a while for me to find it. I also made a point throughout my bachelor's to just take a lot of different courses. So even though I knew I didn't really like probability theory, I still took further courses in it. I still took courses in applied math. I did courses in algebra, even though that's not really my thing. But I think it's still important, even if you have your thing of mathematics, to still be a well-rounded mathematician.
I see. I'm asking because I was talking this morning with one of our students, and he was telling me about the podcast. He recently started listening to it, and he started because he's trying to understand what he's doing with mathematics. So why and what he's studying. And I've heard these comments multiple times from different people. And so I'm really curious to know when this became clearer to you, or if it has become clearer at all. Right now you're saying that you know what you like. At least you found something that you say, this is really something that reaches out to my interest and sparks my joy of doing mathematics. So motivates me. But that's not the whole picture, right? Sometimes you have the motivation of the things you like and you have fun to do, but then also the question of what am I doing here?
I think for me, more importantly than, I found my type of mathematics, was that it gave me more footing and confidence. And now when I do other kinds of mathematics, I just feel more capable. Not in the sense like, I'm so much smarter, but just, hey, I know I can get through this. I can figure it out. I can relate it to things that are familiar or that I love. And that's made it all feel a lot better because, like you mentioned, when you start out, maybe it feels a bit like you're floating around. And I don't want to say pointless, but it's hard to see where you're going and what the point is. And feeling more grounded in that is super helpful. I used to be super scared of algebra courses in my like second and third year. And now I realize I actually absolutely love them, but I just needed to see it in a different light and see more things before I could feel confident enough to appreciate them.
I agree. I think we always call it like in informal terms mathematical maturity. But the more math you see, then even the math that you aren't as comfortable with, you get more comfortable with it just because you know more math in general.
Is it a matter of knowing more mathematics and that's it? Or is it also about getting used to not knowing or getting used to get stuck, getting used to know that it's okay?
It's a lot about getting comfortable with not knowing what you're doing and just trying things and seeing where you get, even when you don't know if that's the right direction to go in.
Definitely. This is also a conversation I have a lot with, especially first-year students, but sometimes high school students. When they come here, they're always like, why don't we get solutions for the exercises? And I tell them, well, it's a really important skill to learn to recognize when you're right, even when you don't have someone to check you. And this takes literal years to develop. And going through that development is really hard because you just want someone to tell you, this is correct, you did a good job. But it's so important you learn to do that yourself. And the only way of learning that is to sit through the frustration and pain and feeling lost. But once you do get that and you start to see it yourself, you make an exercise and you're like, oh, I'm sure I did this correctly. That's a really crazy feeling the first time it happens.
Just especially with my formalization, right? I had the computer tell me, okay, your proof is correct, your proof is not correct. But even then, when you don't know what direction to go in, you can just try a lot of things. And then at some point, you know, yes, this is the direction I need to go in. And that also just gives a huge confidence boost when you just figure it out.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. But let me stop you there. You mentioned your formalization, but I think most of our listeners have no clue what you're talking about.
This was part of my thesis where I worked on proof formalization. This is using a computer program to really check your steps and see if they follow from the axioms of mathematics. So they really go from the ground up, and then you can construct theorems using these axioms, and then you can construct theorems that use the axioms, and this way you can prove a lot of different things. And then the computer can tell you, yes, this follows from the axioms of mathematics.
And since we're talking about what you have worked in your thesis, Jamara, you also mentioned something about knots.
Yes. So I think maybe some of our listeners are somewhat familiar with knot theory. The easy way of thinking about it is taking a shoelace, tying a knot in it, and then gluing the ends together. And that's what we call classical knot theory. So you basically knot a circle. And what I tried doing for my thesis is doing that with a sphere instead of a circle, which means you need to put things in 4 dimensions and it's hard to look at pictures. So the main way we kind of visualize it is by taking these X-ray slices of the 4-dimensional object. And then you can relate things to classical knot theory, and it's just really cool how everything kind of comes together. And as I mentioned, I really like visual things, so I made a bunch of pictures for my thesis. So, yeah.
And in your thesis, you were talking about formalization. I'm jumping back and forth between topics here. What was the aim of the thesis?
The aim of the thesis was really to figure out how does this computer program work, what can I do with it. And then there's a few libraries that host a lot of the theorems that are proven. And I made a contribution to one of the libraries, which was a really cool end result for me to have. For my name to just be out there on GitHub on a project that everyone can see and use if they want to right now.
So extremely different types of
Yes.
mathematics.
Yes.
It's actually something I wanted to mention. Jart and I work together a lot for courses and our projects and whatever. And it's quite funny because for a really long time, I would say for at least 2.5 years, we were super close in the kinds of maths we were into. And actually, I thought you were going to go more into the algebra adjacent things than I was. And kind of last minute, we completely swapped and went the other way. I think that's super interesting.
Yeah, but I also think we still learn from each other a lot. Even though we now do pretty different kind of math, we still get a lot from each other, and we both have different viewpoints to the same problems now.
Yes.
I think that's the biggest richness, right? When your point of views develop in different way, and then you can really talk to each other, bringing different aspects out.
Something I also always say is it's not just that we're into different types of math, but I also think the way we think is very different. I tend to be more in seeing the bigger picture and maybe seeing what kind of proof strategy would work. Jart is super good at working out the details, better than I ever could be. But in that way, it's really nice to work together and to learn more from each other.
We still work together a lot, and I think indeed we complement each other really well in these kinds of things.
Do you know The Bird and the Frog?
No?
There is this old essay by Freeman Dyson in which he describes that there are 2 types of mathematicians, the birds and the frogs. the birds, the fly eye, and look at the bigger picture and try to understand how things are connected with each other and spread the knowledge in a very broad way, but from up there they miss the little details. And the frogs that are deep in the mud, but in their neighborhood they know everything and they can move freely and fastly, nowhere to hide, nowhere to jump from one place to the other. And they were saying the only way to have mathematics is having birds and frogs working together so that somebody can make the connections across long distances and somebody can tell them how to work in those distances. So it feels like this story is at the moment at the table.
I think that's a perfect description. This is a really beautiful analogy. I hadn't heard that before.
I will try the link and I will put it in the show notes so that we have a reference for it. This is actually a very nice essay.
Yes.
So Marcello, I was actually wondering, why did you decide to ask us specifically for the podcast?
Good question. I've been asking around people who they thought could be good people. And your name came up many times. And I also had you in mind because of your involvement with FMF, because in the interaction we had, you were always chatty in the sense that you were not scared of bringing out your opinion, to ask questions. And so I thought somebody in the podcast. And so what I wanted for the podcast is somebody that can actually steer the conversation and move it around. And you seemed actually quite good fits, and I didn't really know how to choose, and so I sent you both an email saying, since we are very, very low on budget this year, if we are 3, maybe it's easier to spread the load. And I was very happy when you both accepted, in fact.
That's really nice to hear. Yeah, I think it's super fun that we get to do this, and especially also getting it to do it together.
Yeah, we've been really good friends since first year. So we were both like, oh, wow, did you also get the email? And then Jamara was like, yeah, I also did. And she was like, oh, are you going to do it? Of course.
Yeah, I don't think we hesitated at all.
No, not at all.
Yeah, I got the response is very, very fast. I thought it would take maybe 1 week or so. I've asked many people around as guests, and very often the response comes after a few weeks. Very often there is hesitation. They don't really like to be in the spotlight or in the open in this way. We are not really used to it. I know myself that it's actually a challenge at first to know that whatever you say now is there and is public. And so I'm used to very slow responses each time I ask, with very, very few exceptions.
I think we both really try to push ourselves to do more things outside of just our studies. I also think it's really important to make time for that because, you know, math is really abstract and sometimes almost out of touch. But it's so much a human thing. We need to collaborate so much. And I think working on that in a non-math specific context is really helpful to do. So we're both super involved in the FMF, like you mentioned. I also do the promo team for the studies. So we help with open days, student 4-day events, things like that. And I know I get so much good feelings out of it, even when things are super scary. Because when you asked me, I was like, I have no idea how to host a podcast. I don't know if I'm capable. On the other hand, if I wasn't capable, you probably wouldn't have asked in the first place. So let's just take the leap and see how it goes. And so far, this is the first episode, but it's really fun already.
Yeah, I've done theater a lot growing up since I was like 9 or something. So I'm maybe a bit more used to having a microphone in front of me. But a podcast is still very different than being on stage. But it's really fun so far during this first episode.
I'm very happy to hear that, first of all. Let's see how it evolves, because I'm really curious to hear an episode where I'm not there, actually. But before we move there, you mentioned the student for a day, and I don't know how many people know about this. It's something I've not used to. So I didn't know from the other university where I was. I don't know if they have the same kind of activity, but I found it super cool. So can you explain a bit what this is?
Yeah, of course. So I think starting with an open day is maybe something people are familiar with. You go to university, there's short talks from like between 15 minutes and an hour, and you just get to know the university. Student for a day is really different. You go for one specific degree, and maybe for the Dutch people, we call it a meeloopdag, and you just follow classes. So you go to some lectures where a professor sits and gives you a talk for an hour or two. We have tutorials where you make exercises about that lecture, and it's really like being a student for a day, hence the name. And I think for so many high school students who came and did this, that was really enlightening for them, whether it be knowing that they do or don't want to do math. But people usually come out of it with a very strong and confident opinion about whether it's a good fit for them.
I do have to say, when I was going through the choice process, I was doing it during COVID, so there weren't students for datings. But I was always under the impression that you would just be thrown into a class of actual math students. And I think it's good to know you will just be in a class with other prospective students, other students that are going to maybe study math, but maybe not. They're not students yet. because I was always very intimidated by this because I thought I was just going to be thrown into a class of first years. But that's not what it is.
No, definitely. And this is also something we've tried to improve the last few years, is kind of update the web pages to have a more accurate description. And also when people come to an open day, just tell them about it, tell them what it's like and why they should definitely join.
That's a very good point that you make, because I was going to ask next, but so we are taking students from high school and just drop them in group theory or in, I don't know, dynamical systems analysis. I think I would just scare them.
No, definitely not. The day is really specifically hosted for them. So we do try to have mathematics that feel more university-like, in the sense that they're maybe more proof-based or more why do we do this or do we care about this, rather than here's some exercises to compute. But they are like specifically tailored to be suitable for high school students. We make sure that there's some exercises which are a bit more challenging, because that's also the university experience, is not getting anything and being really lost for a bit, but it's specifically made for high school students, yes.
That's very interesting. So for whoever is interested, I'll put a link in the show note. But it's something that if I think back to my youth, the reason I started doing mathematics was something similar. There was no program as such, but there was our mathematics teacher that was super involved in trying to push mathematics and show us what it is besides high school in our last year. And she invited a professor from a university nearby to give a talk. It was about the mathematics of gravitational lenses. And then when they were there, she said, but you know, it would be nice if you could just bring them on to the university for a couple of days and see how it goes there. And they actually did it, and it was so fun.
That's amazing.
But this was like a one-person thing that our teacher suddenly contacted this professor, and they randomly decided for our class to pick a few people that were interested and do it in one day. It's not that there was, at the time, a program. So it's really, really nice to know that these programs exist. And I imagine not just for mathematics.
Yeah, it exists for at least almost all FSC degrees, and then also some other degrees like history, archaeology, but of course some of the more popular degrees fill up really quickly. The one for biology is always full within minutes.
Oh, wow.
Because
like
they have
concert.
hundreds of students each year, yeah. But it's also really nice. I think this also plays into the hierarchy thing we were talking about earlier. The professors we ask are always super happy and helpful to come give a talk at an open day or a student for a day. And they love seeing the future students and talking to them. They always stick around to have some drinks and have a chat with them, tell them about their experience. And I think that's super nice.
Very, very interesting. So we talked a bit about the nice parts of your degrees, the surprises, the friendship that you developed and so on. I'd like also to know a bit about the hiccups. So what challenges did you face in your path until here?
I think for me, most of the hiccups were not directly university or math related, but just in my personal life. And of course, trying to navigate university around that is quite a challenge. But I was also really surprised by how many support systems there are, and that things can still work out even if it really feels like it won't. So that's really good, I think.
I agree on the support systems, especially with an amazing academic advisor who is always willing to help with anything coming up in your personal life or your academic life. And they are always happy to help and have time for you. And also in first year, we have mentor groups, and that immediately makes you feel less alone in everything as well. I think that's almost my biggest struggle was in first year, feeling alone. But the mentor groups really help with that.
How does the mentor group helps with that? How does it work first? Because I know a bit in the few cases where I was invited, but I don't really know the structure. And
yeah, so you get assigned into a group of, I would say, about 10 students. And then you have a mentor, which is a higher year student. And then in the first week, you have a few meetings, and your mentor checks in on you throughout the first 2 blocks to see how you're doing. They organize some activities for you to bond with your mentor group. And then obviously people drop out. I think for my mentor group, there's actually only 2 people left. But just in the first year, you really then get into this group. And you at least know some people also outside of the degree, because you do things outside of university with them as well.
Yeah, and it's really nice that the mentor is a higher year student, and they really pick students for this who are nice and approachable and easy to talk to. And you can ask them anything, right? Not just help, this course is hard, where do I go for more support, but also I need to do groceries, which store is the best one to go to, or my tire of my bike burst, where's the closest shop to get it fixed, things like that. You can just ask them anything, and it's just really easy to get help with all the things you need help with as a first year, because everything's super intimidating when you start out.
Yeah, so it's really a way of just getting into the wall as a life of a student, not necessarily the academic educational
Yeah, and I
part.
think it also helps with getting to know some higher year students. Because in our degree, really, of course, there's first, second, third year, master students, whatever. But everyone kind of knows everyone because of how small the degree is. And having one higher year student as your mentor, you then maybe meet their friends and you get into contact with the study association. And that kind of just helps you build your network. And then there's always someone who can help you out with whatever you need help with.
I can imagine that if you arrive, you're alone, it's really daunting on you. All these new things, getting to live on your own, getting to figure out where to do things and how and what, and figuring out the degree, as you said, is sometimes shockingly different from what you expect. So it's very nice to know that there are at least structure to let you bond and find your group of friends. At least help with that.
Yeah. In terms of what I found hardest for the actual math and degree, I think that's when I was in my second, third year and I hadn't really found my specific passion in math yet, that I just felt so lost and almost felt like there was something wrong with me because I actively saw people figuring it out and I had not figured it out yet. That really did something with my motivation for a while, but thankfully I knew so many people who had gone through that before and they all told me, hey, this is normal, this happens to everyone. You know, of course, it's possible for you to change your interest and maybe not love mathematics anymore, but don't give up after half a year. Sit with it for a while and be open and you'll get back on track.
I think one other struggle that I really had was in first year, there is always more to do. You can always learn more, you can do more exercises. And I really almost drove myself into burnout in my first year by just always wanting to do more. And it took a while to accept that good enough is good enough. And that you don't always need to do more.
I definitely agree. And I also think that plays into how people end up in this degree, right? When we're in high school, we're probably the best math student in the class by a long shot. Everything is easy. You finish the exercise in 10 minutes and then you sit there and do nothing. Here you can work for days and you'll never be finished because there's always more exercises, more practice, more stuff to look into. And that's really something you need to learn to balance when you've done enough for yourself. And it will also change from course to course, right? Some courses you'll do 1 hour a week and be good. Other courses you need to really work for it.
Yeah, that's part of the game.
Yes.
I think. So it's really about a changing perspective, arriving with some expectations and understanding that you need to let go some of those.
Yeah. I actually think sometimes it's easier for the people who study math that were maybe not hyper geniuses at it, but just really interested because they're already more used to working for it and they really care about it. Rather than, oh, but I was the best of my class, I will do nothing, and it'll just come to me. Here it won't.
Yeah, you also have to, I guess they're already used to the frustration, and you have to learn to get used to that.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, you need a pretty high frustration tolerance to do math long term, but it's something you can work on, and I think it's helpful for other walks of life to have that as a good skill.
Yeah, I remember even last week I was working on a homework question, and I spent 9 to 5 and I just couldn't figure it out. I ended up with a sign error every single time. And then it turned out the question was wrong, but you don't know that when you're just sitting there with your notebook and just you and your notebook and your sign error. Like, what's going wrong here?
But now it feels like you'll go insane for a day and you know it'll be okay. But when that happens for the first time, you're like, oh, I'm so stupid. I can't do this degree, whatever. And you need to just get through that.
Yeah, that's something we hear a lot from the students. The annoying part is that we try to explain this in class and mention it at least multiple times, that you should just go get stuck and live with it. And then when you're going out running or doing your groceries, you say, oh, but that's how you do that.
I think this is why it's really important to have good contact with other students because, of course, all our professors say this and, of course, they're being honest, but it is kind of like, yeah, that's easy for you to say, right? And when you see someone who has actually done your specific course who now looks super smart to you, but having had that exact same experience, it's a lot easier to kind of believe it.
Now that I agree, but there's also that on top of this, that the students that come to class are, at this point, are even a minority of the actual class. So that only a few of them will get this message across.
Yeah, all I can say is please go to your classes. It really helps even when you think it doesn't. Even when you don't understand anything, you'll still have that extra exposure. And sometimes repeated exposure is just what you need to have things click into place.
Yeah, in my first year, like I heard all the higher years say, oh, go to your classes, go to your classes, go to your classes. And then one course I didn't listen to them and I almost didn't make it. And since then I've always gone to most of my classes.
Yeah, and sometimes that's not enough. You just need more time. I was talking this morning with 2 of our TAs, and we were talking about analysis of manifold. And they were saying during the course, I was really struggling to understand what we are doing. I'm not going to give any details on this because it's going to bring us in a big rabbit hole. But then they said 1 year later, when we were actually using this stuff in a different course, they finally I understood, oh, but that's all of it. That's so simple. But it took the pain and the frustration of the course. And then I get the healing of 1 year to make it sink in a way that now you say, oh, but that's now easy. I can understand what we're doing.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's also a really common experience to go, oh my, this course is so hard. I don't know if I'll pass the exam. And okay, maybe you'll pass the exam barely, whatever. 2 months later, you look back and you're like, but it was so easy. What was wrong with me? I didn't see it. But I think as humans, we so severely underestimate the power of latent learning, like just letting your brain process things and then looking back on it later. It's an incredibly powerful tool.
And it has also happened to me that I passed the exam because I know the definitions, but then I take another course that's maybe adjacent to the course that I was struggling with. And then suddenly everything just clicks into place and you can see the bigger picture. Where does this definition fall? Why do we even have this definition? And then in another course that just suddenly becomes clear. You can digest everything.
Yeah, definitely. Also, I think as you go on in your studies, you learn to kind of recognize hey, I've been staring at this too long. I need to put it down, even if it's for 10 minutes or an hour, and come back to it. Because when you just blindly keep staring at it, you'll just get more and more stuck, especially if you're on the wrong track. Sometimes you need to take a step back and just, take a break.
And sometimes when you keep getting the same solution and the exercise says something else, you should simply just send an email to the lecturer or the DA saying, here I really think something is wrong with this exercise, which more often than not, you will be right.
Yeah, it just happens. Professors are also humans. Typos happen, and that's okay. But I think this is also maybe good for your confidence is when you learn to recognize, hey, I really did this correctly. I double, triple checked it. Probably there's something wrong with the exercise. When you start out, you'll feel like everything is just your own fault.
And I think especially in first year, the first time this happens to you, that you discover a mistake by a lecturer, and then you're like, wow, I'm actually smart. I can do this. And it's also just almost a confidence boost.
Yeah, and it does help that the professors here are so approachable and so nice. So it's kind of easy to point out, like, hey, could there be something wrong with this exercise? Because I keep getting the same thing. And always they're just perceptive of that feedback.
My experience is that this is more or less the case in most places. So there is this aura of mystery around professors, but this is mostly just usually a title and the fact that they struggled over this material for a lot longer and they are now older, but that's about it. Let me take a step back. There is one more question I would like to ask you about mathematics. The impression I had when I was a student is that you have all these subjects. They are all separate subjects. You have analysis, you have linear algebra, you have logic, you have topology, and so on and so forth. And it takes an insane amount of time, if not even up until you do your PhD, to realize that, in fact, they are a lot more tightly connected than they look like. So you keep seeing them as silos, and even when you start seeing the connection, you still see them as silos, as numerical mathematics and PDEs and so on and so forth, when there is a lot more in common than there is as a difference. Is this something that you already experience yourself? Is it something that you experience late, early? How is it as a student now?
I think for me, it was around the end of my bachelor's, like third, fourth year, that I started to realize this. And part of me wishes we could convey this message earlier, but I think it's kind of hard to do so. I like to think about it as building with Legos or building a house. You start with the individual little stones and they all seem to just separately sit on the floor with distance between them. But as you put in more stones, the holes kind of fill up. And at some point you'll put a big floor or roof on it. And now suddenly it's sticking together. And then you build even more stuff on top of that. Then you start to see things come together. But when the fields as a whole are just so new to you, it's hard to say, oh, this is connected to XYZ thing when you've never heard of the XYZ thing before.
Yeah, I think around third year is also when the professors start to kind of introduce how things are related. Especially that's an experience I have had in courses, that they're like, oh, but this will show up in PDEs. This will show up in ODEs. This will show up in algebra. Then you take the other course and you're like, oh, that's what they meant. It indeed is connected. But I think that's a really nice thing that the professors already say these kinds of things to you, kind of foreshadow what is coming.
Is it better now at the master? I know it's just 2 blocks or even 1, but do you see that a bit more, or is still like silos?
No, I think it's definitely visible, and especially with the courses we're taking now in integral systems, we kind of started out with a Venn diagram and a cube of connecting all the different fields of mathematics and everyone trying to place themselves in the Venn diagram. But also everyone's struggling to do that because they're like, yeah, I do some geometry and some algebra, but definitely also analysis, because everything shows up everywhere to some degree. It's incredibly hard to segregate that, and especially the further you get.
Yeah, it was a Venn diagram, and one circle was algebra, one circle was analysis, and the other one was geometry. And the question was, where are you in this Venn diagram? And it took me a really long time to actually think about it. And then the lecture was like, well, this course is going to be in the intersection of all 3. And in my first year, I probably would have thought, there is an intersection?
Yeah. I also thought it was kind of funny that, this implication that now we limited to these 3 kind of main fields of mathematics. For me, the choice was easy to put myself in the intersection of algebra and geometry, but that would then seem to apply to algebraic geometry, and that's definitely not true. So you can't really just simplify things like that.
Thank you very much. Before I ask you one last question, let me chip in a bit more on all the suggestions and tips and hints you gave to fellow students. I really hope that there are our young students listening here. Do you have something more that you would like to tell them to help them go through the first year or go through their bachelor?
Don't give up, honestly.
Definitely, yes. Try to believe in yourself, which I know is incredibly hard to do. When you're not able to believe in yourself, find people who believe in you and will tell you. And yeah, don't give up. Keep trying. If you love mathematics, you can do it.
And I think another one is also that math really is a team sport. Don't try to do it on your own, but do it together, form study groups, discuss math, teach math to your fellow students. That's really going to be the best way to learn it. And not just sit by yourself and just read, because that's not how math works.
No, you need to be hands-on and actually do it. And even if it feels like you're getting nowhere, which most of the time you will not get anywhere, that's actually where you learn most.
Love this. Thank you very much. So we have spoken about you and mathematics, us and mathematics for a long time now. What about the non-mathematics part of who you are? So what do you do outside mathematics?
So like I mentioned previously, I've done theater for a long time. I like to be on stage, do improv. I also have a rabbit that I like to spend time with. I have him introduced to like obstacle courses, so we jump over things together while he's on a leash, and we do that for fun a lot.
Nice.
And it's just really fun. And also, I can always talk math to him because he doesn't understand anyways.
So you study buddy.
I mean, he has heard my thesis presentation about 30 times, I would say.
Beautiful.
So for me, I do dog training outside of university, and actually kind of similar to how I approach math, rather than really focusing in on one super specific kind of dog sports. I like to do a bit of everything and use that broader knowledge to connect the different fields and give people new perspectives. That's really something I love doing. At the moment, I have a border collie and we practice frisbee. So I throw the frisbee, he catches it while jumping over my back or doing a back fold or stuff like that.
So acrobatic.
Yes, but for the dog, not for me. I also used to participate in something we call lure coursing. So this is specifically for sighthounds, and it's meant to mimic hunting bunnies. But rather than bunnies, we use a plastic bag because they hunt by sight rather than by smell. And I'm actually an international judge for this, so sometimes I get to fly abroad, see cool countries, and judge a competition there. And I also really love photography, specifically dogs.
Do you let Jamara next to your rabbit?
I let Jamara next to my rabbit. I don't let the dog next to my rabbit.
Did you use Airtrip in training the rabbit for your obstacle courses?
No, my rabbit, he has his house and that's his place. No dog will come there.
Thank you both very much. This has been a very fun conversation, and I look forward to the next episode, as I hope all our listeners are doing. So thank you all for being here. Thank you all for listening. And if you like this episode, please send it to your friends and share it.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.